Hello children, it's Mr. Lassard again, back for another lesson. Today we're going to be talking about something that I call CEEC. I'm going to be giving you the basic rundown of what I mean when I say CEEC, but essentially it's how to present an argument, which is important for what we're working on right now. As always, these are required notes, so make sure that you have them. I'm sure that you have a required due date as well, so make sure that you have them on that date. The way that this can help is specifically in the unit that we're working on right now, although it's important in other things as well, is that one of the things we're working on is learning to present an argumentative claim with sufficient background information, how to support that claim with counterclaims and rhetorical appeals, and how to reinforce that claim in a conclusion. Now, we've talked about a lot of this stuff in class, but I want to take a step back and just focus on how to present an argumentative claim. Because if you can do that, then all the other stuff that we've been talking about in class should also fall in place. And another thing to think about is that, basically everything that you write for a teacher minus a few things is an argument. So if you think of everything as an argument, then you can literally apply what I'm about to tell you to almost anything that any teacher has you write ever, and it should help. So CEEC is basically the structure of an argument. Now, I know we've talked specifically about certain things that happen during an argument, elements of argumentation. We've talked about all of that in class. So right now we're taking a step back and we're just looking at the basics, but you should see how the things that we've talked about in class apply to what I'm about to tell you here. So CEEC, each letter stands for one part of how to structure your argument. You've got the claim, you've got evidence, you've got elaboration, and you've got a conclusion. CEEC. So, and they should always go in that order. So if you start with the claim, then your claim is basically what you're trying to prove. So you should ask yourself, what am I trying to prove? Whatever you're trying to prove is your claim, and you should write that out as a sentence. And that's it. That's your claim, the thing that you're trying to prove. Your evidence, and then you need to make sure that every time you're transitioning between each of these sections, you're using some kind of transition. Sometimes it's just a word, other times it's a full sentence of transition. But make sure you're not just lumping them in like part by part, chunk, but that you're actually transitioning from the claim to your evidence and then so on and so forth. So your evidence then is information that you have that proves it. Now in class, we've talked about different types of evidence. So you can have empirical evidence or logical evidence or anecdotal evidence, whatever it is that you decide you're using to prove this specific claim, leave that on the table. Right now, we're just talking about here's where you put your evidence in. You put it in after you've told me what you're going to prove to me. Then you transition, and you transition into your elaboration. Now, before I talk about elaboration, remember that you've already taken notes on how to elaborate upon evidence. Those are the notes that talk about what, why, and apply. So you may need to go back to those notes and look at them as well. But elaboration comes after your evidence, and basically elaboration tells me how your evidence proves your claim. So you've got a claim, this is what I'm trying to prove. You've got evidence, this is information that proves my claim. You've got elaboration, this is how my evidence proves my claim. Remember to look back for more specific notes about elaboration. And you transition one more time. Oops, sorry, I skipped it. Think about this also, like a lot of times you have to do the evidence and elaboration part multiple times within a paragraph or within a paper. I'm telling you this has to happen just in this order, but sometimes you do evidence and elaboration 3 times, sometimes you do it once, sometimes you do it 17 times. You just do it as many times as you need to prove your claim. Then you transition into your conclusion, and your conclusion is essentially what makes the information important to the reader. So you tell them that. Now again, you have more specific notes on what conclusions are, which you may need to revisit. But in this case, we're just talking about structuring that argument so that all the stuff comes up when it needs to come up. So claim, evidence, elaborate, conclude. And this works for arguments of any size. Like sometimes you only need a paragraph to make your argument, and other times you need a paper. And so if you're working in a paragraph, then your claim is a one-sentence answer to a question. Like a lot of times a teacher will say, respond to this. Okay, well, I know I need my claim. It's my first sentence in the paragraph. It answers the question. What's my answer to the question? If you're working in a paper, then your claim is essentially your introduction paragraph. We have notes about introductions as well. And your thesis is the last sentence of the paragraph. So the claim is essentially an entire paragraph in a paper, or it's the first sentence of a paragraph if you're just writing a paragraph. Then in your evidence and elaboration, which kind of work together, you can't do one without the other, obviously, are in a paragraph, they're your middle sentences, and they get straight to the point, basically. You know, you have the single sentence that responds to the question, and then you get straight to the point with your evidence and elaboration. If you're working with a paper, then your evidence and elaboration are a little bit more complex because they're the body paragraphs. So you think of the claim, the first paragraph, the introduction paragraph, as the claim paragraph with the thesis. And then your body paragraphs are your evidence and elaboration paragraphs. However, each of those body paragraphs should follow the CEEC format. So each body paragraph should have its own claim related to the thesis, its own evidence which supports its particular claim. You can also think of its claim as its topic sentence. And sometimes, or oftentimes, since you're making an argument, at least one of those body paragraphs should be addressing counterclaims, which are used to disprove arguments, which we will talk briefly about on the next slide. Then, of course, you move on to the conclusion. In a paragraph, a conclusion is the wrap-up. It's usually a sentence, maybe two, and it connects to the reader. Just one sentence in a paragraph. And then, of course, in a paper, your conclusion is the whole concluding paragraph, which, again, you have some notes on and you might need to look back to. But the point of this slide is to see that whether you're making a brief one-paragraph argument or a full-length, paper-length argument, you're always going to use this claim, evidence, elaborate, and conclude, CEEC format. And so you need to get used to kind of seeing it in your work. Counterclaims go. Remember that a counterclaim, which we've addressed briefly in class, is a claim that's made to rebuke an opposing argument. So you can say something like, I know that the other side is going to say this. Here's the information that I have to back it up. And my tip to you about counterclaims, you never want to leave them out. They should be part of, especially when you're writing a paper, they should be part of that evidence elaboration part, right? You need to provide evidence and elaboration to counterclaim what the opposing side says. But my tip to you is to anticipate what the opposing side is going to say and not just make something up, right? What possibly could those other people say if they were trying to argue against my claim? And then argue against it on your own. And of course, like I said, you follow the same format for counterclaims. Just think of it as the first C, instead of being a claim, is a counterclaim. Counterclaim, evidence, elaborate, conclude. All right? So it remains CEEC all the way through, but you're always following that route. You need to do a reflection. You may want to think about this question for your reflection. So this is merely the basic form of an argument. Like I said, it's a simplified form of an argument that helps you keep track of what you need to do. What are the things that might make it more complicated in the long run as you start making more and more complex arguments? I'll see you in class.